We're now going to move on to UCITs, and the next slide shows the responses from participants in relation to liquid alternatives. We asked them what was the likelihood of launching a new liquid alternatives fund, a UCITS or a 40 Act fund. Over the longer term, PwC estimates demand for liquid alternative funds worldwide will rise from $260 billion at the end of 2013 to $664 billion by 2020. This rise can be explained by the coming evolution in liquid alternatives. Whereas the first wave of liquid alternatives has focused largely on institutions, the second wave will target the retail and mass affluent markets, including the rapidly expanding defined contribution pension fund market. There are a number of compelling reasons for investors and investment firms alike to seize the opportunity offered by liquid alternatives. Traditional firms that already have UCITS and 40 Act structures are looking for additional strategies and asset classes to add to their range. As investors seek new areas of return, they are increasingly turning to hedge fund or other alternative strategies, thereby increasing demand. Liquid alternatives can be suitable for both retail and institutional channels, so a broader range of potential investors can be targeted. Some firms are looking for ways of bringing their hedge fund strategies to the broader market, but are put off by the burden of AFMD, and therefore concentrate their energies on UCITS platforms, which have broader investor appeal and wider recognition as a regulated product. Hedge fund firms entered the market for liquid alternative assets with their eyes wide open, however. One very large European hedge fund manager noted, UCITS are massive pools and the German market looks attractive, but we're talking about pretty flighty investors in these kinds of funds. For hedge fund firms outside the EU and the US, the burgeoning liquid alternative sector provides another route into these regions. Some Asian hedge fund managers, for instance, struggle to gain profile and sales traction amongst US investors. Those firms that are able to gain access to retail and mass affluent distribution platforms in the US may be able to gather assets without having to substantially increase marketing resources. In this sense, the liquid alternatives evolution could be a leveller in geographical terms. There are likely to be many more liquid alternative funds, with half of survey respondents in the UK planning to launch one in 2015-2016. Nearly a third of the US firms are planning to launch liquid alternatives, but just 14% of the continental European firms plan to launch a liquid alternatives fund in 2016. It might be worth noting at this stage the growth of the UCITS market in 2015. As mentioned at the start, Europe had a great 2015. The main developments in 2015 can be summarised as follows. Net sales of UCITS and AIFs reached $717 billion in 2015 compared to just over $600 billion in 2014. UCITS net sales amounted to €572 billion, up from $463 billion in 2013. Equity funds registered net sales of $133 billion, whereas long-term UCITS net sales totaled $495 billion. Multi-asset funds registered net sales of over $230 billion. AIFs recorded net inflows of $145 billion, up slightly on the $138 billion gathered in 2014. And overall, at the end of 2015, net assets of UCITS and alternative funds domiciled in Europe increased to €12.6 trillion compared to €11.3 trillion at the end of 2014. Suzanne, what are the key challenges and opportunities for UCITS managers in Europe?
Well, UCITS is a global recognised brand. It's been around for 30 odd years. It's a tried and tested product, and it continues to strive with like 8 trillion in assets in 29,000 funds. I guess the main attraction of the UCITS brand is the distribution opportunities. UCITS are sold widely throughout Europe and beyond. The main countries where we see UCITS sold in Europe are consistently, Germany, France, UK, Switzerland, Spain, Italy, and you can see the others listed there on the screen. If we look at these top markets for UCITS in Europe, over the last 5 years, you will see that these are the countries that would be consistently in the top 10. There will be only changes in the rankings. But not only can you distribute your UCITS in Europe, it's a global recognised brand, and given that it's a regulated product, non-EU countries are comfortable with it as well. So UCITs are sold widely in Asia, the Americas, and Middle East, in countries like Hong Kong, Thailand, and Singapore, Macau, and South Korea. Bahrain, South Africa, Chile, Qatar, and Oman. These would be the main ones outside the EU at the moment. And huge growth is expected to continue outside of Europe by 2020, particularly in the Americas. I think UCITs are sold in over 70 countries at the moment throughout the globe, and each year we see more and more countries added to this list. But while the UCITS passport is one of the success stories of Europe, it's not without its drawbacks. It's a common regulatory framework, but it does suffer from inconsistencies from individual country nuances. There is inconsistent marketing rules and regulatory fees and tax regimes and other practices imposed by host countries. These pose considerable headache for managers when they're trying to get to grips in what their requirements are, whether they need a local paying agent or supplements. And all these local add-ons are an added cost, which can add up to a hefty sum. Although the European Commission has released an action plan on building a capital markets union, and this plan is hoping to address some of these issues.
Thank you very much. Sarah, is there anything in the UCITS 5 directive that comes in March 2016 that needs to be considered from a distribution perspective?
Yeah, well, from a practical and administrative point of view, there is a new requirement for the KID to have an additional statement in relation to remuneration. As the date of implementation of this is looming, it's going to be March the 18th of this year, there's been a lot of concern amongst UCITS managers that they will have to reissue their KIDs with this additional statement in it. And the time frame around that is so soon after completing the annual update project that did cause a lot of concern. ESMA did issue a Q&A very recently though, and actually it's given some reprieve. Unless required to by their own national laws and regulations, that requirement won't be in place, and the UCITS will be allowed to update the KID with this extra statement the next time that they have to do so.
Thanks, Sarah. Christoph, Suzanne highlighted some challenges with the distribution of UCITS funds in Europe. Will the CMU plan address some of these inconsistencies?
Well, Ken, in September 2015, the European Commission released its action plan on building a capital market union. And it is true that this action plan aims to address some of these issues. The action plan will consider industry response to the Commission Green Paper on building a capital market union. ESMA's response to this Green Paper identifies possible operational barriers to setting up and marketing funds across the EU and to cross-border retail participation in UCITS. If some or all of these were taken on board, it would make life easier for UCITS manager. For example, the UCITS 4 directive simplified the procedure for cross-border marketing of UCITS by introducing a regulator-to-regulator notification and clarifying the role of each national regulator. This procedure has proved to be a success. However, under the UCITS 4 directive, any updates to the documentation provided to the regulator of the host member state at the time of the notification of marketing have to be communicated by the UCITS itself and not by the home regulator. ESMA therefore believes that the notification procedure would even be more efficient if the home regulator were in charge of transmitting the updates of the documents. Indeed, this would make the procedure much easier for UCITS manager. Another area is that the UCITS product provides for a detailed set of rules on cost disclosures, namely through the KID provisions, and on remuneration rules. However, there is currently a lack of harmonization in the rules governing cost and expense in a UCITS product. This therefore may hamper the comparability of different product offerings and therefore reduce the attractiveness of UCITS to retail investors. In line with the mandate under UCITS 5 directive, the Commission could analyze what the common cost and expense of retail investment products across Europe are, and consider whether further harmonization of the disclosure of those costs and expense, with a view to bringing new competitive pressures, is needed, while taking into account all the specifics and differences between the offered products. Notwithstanding the progress made through the UCITS 4 directive in the simplification and harmonization of the procedures for cross-border fund merger, feedback from stakeholders shows that a major obstacle to this activity seems to be the different tax treatment of merger across the EU. And I'm sure one of my tax colleagues might be in a better position to comment on tax harmonization in the EU. However, the ESMA response is that the Commission could launch an exercise to identify more precisely the tax-related obstacle to cross-border fund merger in order to ascertain if there is any scope to try resolving these. Subject to the outcome of this analysis, consideration should be given to harmonizing the different tax regimes across Europe governing cross-border fund merger. This would introduce clarity and incentivize this type of activity by creating economies of scale for asset managers.